Thank you all for being here. Week 2 of the session. It's going to be an interesting week out here with the Senate Bill 13 proponents out tomorrow and the rest of this week, and then the vaccine choice or anti-vax, whichever perspective you have, will be out here on Wednesday, so it'll be a busy time. But more importantly, it's going to be a busy time because the bills, by and large, have all been assigned to committee. The final 100 or so bills will be assigned out today. And so all those bills, all the committees are going in full swing this week. And I expect a lot of substantive policy discussions on all legislation this week. We're still, as a caucus, having very productive conversations on health care and how do we move forward on making sure Oklahomans are healthier and have good access to health care. And I'm going to open it up to questions because I feel like my nose is about to start bleeding again.
Get you some tissue.
Yeah, I've got some in my pocket.
We'll talk slowly then. You said you're having productive discussions on healthcare. Are the discussions currently more productive than they have been over the last 10 years that this issue could have been addressed in the legislature?
That's a very passive-aggressive question.
Well, no, there was more the slowness.
Yeah. No, there's always our natural reaction in the House and Senate in the past has been to say no to Medicaid expansion. Obviously, there's a state question pending, which would put it into the Constitution and give the state absolutely no flexibility, no ability to innovate. The state Senate last year, through leadership of Senator McCourtney, attempted to advance an Oklahoma plan that we just didn't have quite the support to get it over the hump last year. But we remain committed to trying to find creative, innovative, and flexible solutions for Oklahoma, and are having those discussions both inside the caucus and with our counterparts in the House and the governor's office. And different relevant associations as well.
Sure, okay. Yeah, I mean, this is sort of a follow-up to exactly that, is that, I think some people would say the legislature didn't, accomplish something on this topic for the last several years. Now, obviously, there were reasons, uncertainty on what Congress might do. But then, on the other hand, now the pendulum has swung the other way, where 802 puts in the Constitution that no new requirements and restrictions can be added. So I've heard it described as, partisan politics almost at its worst, that, we didn't get something done for a long time, and then now the other extreme is mandate it and put it in the Constitution so nothing can ever be changed. Can you describe how you view that situation?
Yeah, that would be the very cynical view on it. I think that we have tried. I remember Senator Stanislawski, my very first session out here in 2011, looked at trying to do health exchanges. We had studies through that. We had legislation that advanced, but not all the way to the finish line. I have entertained conversations personally as a legislator before I became in leadership of trying to figure out a more free market solution to healthcare issues. I will tell you that the wind was really taken of our sails when the late Senator John McCain went onto the U.S. Senate floor and cast a vote against the repeal and replace. We had real hope that we were going to be able to overturn a complete government takeover of healthcare in total, and no disrespect to the late senator, but our hope was kind of lost that the U.S. House and U.S. Senate would solve our problem. Also, we had maintenance of effort issues. Obamacare, when it was passed, had some very stringent maintenance of effort requirements that would not allow the state to draw down in any area in order to give the flexibility to give the working adults, the working paycheck to paycheck individuals up to 138%. The health care they sought. And so Obamacare was very rigid in our ability to be able to be flexible and adapt to the needs of Oklahoma. I'm excited that the Stitt administration has worked with the Trump administration to try to create some innovation. We'll see if that works. We'll see the details of that. But anything that gives the state maximum flexibility while ensuring access to health care and trying to help improve Oklahoma healthcare outcomes will entertain.
Kind of Trace's question on the politics of this, It's an election year. I could see some hesitancy from Republican members of the legislature in wanting to expand Medicaid in an election year. Do you think you'll have trouble persuading your caucus if you all do end up deciding that you're on board with Sooner Care 2.0?
You know, I don't know. It's a difficult discussion, election year or not election year, because there's philosophical differences of how much should the government be in charge of health care. And Obamacare or Affordable Care Act, obviously I have a long record of opposing that. I worked for U.S. Senator Tom Coburn during the time that it was adopted and ramrodded through the U.S. Congress. What we won't do is ramrod a solution through. We're going to have robust discussion in the Senate and make sure that we are eyes wide open going into any solution we pursue. But it's not an election year or non-election year. It's a philosophical issue of is this the best way to deliver health care to Oklahomans?
Do you feel like you've gotten more answers from the state administration since you first saw the initial details of this proposal?
We're working to get more details, and their dialogue's ongoing. I've enjoyed the conversations with the governor and his team and trying to get more details. My caucus is not a type of caucus. I'm not the type of person that just says, okay, hey, the governor's rolling this out. Let's see what we can do to get on board. We want to know how it actually works. And we're in the process of trying to figure out the nitty-gritty details right now.
Is there any sense of urgency considering we've got an election coming up on the state question?
Oh, well, you know, sine die will be here before that, so we have time to deal with it. As far as my concern early on, just to be brutally honest, was the timing of how long would it take CMS to approve anything that we wanted to do. A state plan amendment is fairly easy to get adopted. That's a turnkey operation, but when you're trying to get waivers, that is anywhere from a 6 to 18 month process. When I saw Governor Stitt standing alongside Seema Verna and the Trump administration, I realized that their support would really help expedite the process. I was concerned early on, would we actually be able to get it approved or disapproved either way before that election happened?
There's really no question that the election is going to be in November.
I don't know. That's a question for Governor Stitt.
Are you concerned at all? I mean, on the timing issue, I mean, Governor Stitt hasn't put any money for this plan in his current budget, which I guess makes sense since still has to figure it out with the legislature. But they said at earliest this wouldn't be implemented until fiscal year 2022, and part of that would be because they're going to have to wait on federal approval.
There's going to be some federal approval. The State Question 802, the timelines that I have seen, the rudimentary timelines, it would actually be implemented later than a Sooner Care 2.0 would be. But we're still waiting for some more definitive answers on that.
I think you've said this before, that you're not in favor of 802 and the constitutional component of it and all that. So maybe, you know, what would be the case that you would make to voters, you know, about that? And if that's not appropriate in this setting, then excuse that part. But do you feel like it would have been better had some of the things you had worked on and your caucus had worked on in the last 3 or 4 years, rebalancing or whatever, you know, proposals there were, had been achieved, and thus 802 might not have been proposed by the people who proposed it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand your question. I'm not one that likes to look in the rearview mirror a lot. We've had our opportunities for different reasons that didn't advance, and we are where we are right now. We're looking at the front windshield and looking at a potential election on this question that I think would be detrimental because it wouldn't give policymakers the flexibility to change as realities change in Oklahoma, and that's the reason I'm opposed to it. I'm not opposed to trying to increase access, and we're working toward that end. We'll see.
Can you offer any opinion about bipartisan support of bail system reform, or perhaps the Student Borrower's Bill of Rights, or the Earned Income Tax Credit?
Okay, so let me take those one at a time. I am having a very difficult time trying to hear, so I may have to repeat myself some. The first one was on bail, right? Did you say bail reform?
Yeah.
So this caucus stood strong. Not this just caucus, this Senate chamber stood strong on bail reform last year. We sent the bill over. We are hopeful that we'll get some real progress made on bail reform. I know several district attorneys are working with criminal justice reform advocates to try to come up with a compromise on bail reform. We're very interested in bail reform. Probably the bigger bed impact would be our sentencing reform, which was contained in Senate Bill 616 last year that didn't make it all the way to the finish line. We are very committed to continuing the conversation on criminal justice reform. We also have to balance it out. I talked to the YWCA last week, about some concerns they had about strangulation and is domestic violence a violent crime. We need to make sure that that pendulum's in the middle, not too far on just throw away the key, and not too far on just treatment solves everything. There are real problems when it comes to strangulation, domestic violence we need to address. And so we're going to try to have a balanced approach this year. Bail reform is an important part of that. Sentencing reform is an important part of that. What did you say was the borrower's right to know? Is that what you said?
Yeah, the student loan bill, what's it called? The borrower's bill of rights, student borrower's bill of rights.
I'm not familiar with that. I mean, I've seen a headline on it, but is that a House bill or is that a Senate bill?
Yeah, it is.
I have not. I've read many of the Senate bills, not all of them yet. I have not read any of the House bills yet.
What about the earned income tax credit?
So earned income, that was, if I remember right, around $29–30 million hit that we've been trying to negotiate over the last couple budget cycles. Heretofore, the other side has not been interested in having that conversation be a part of a budget discussion. I've heard increased communication on the outside the Capitol, different advocacy groups pushing that, but we'll really get into the weeds of the budget late March, early April, and I'm sure that'll be a topic of consideration.
Education, what would be your, I know you don't like to speak for your caucus, but what would your goals be? Or maybe this is actually better. Have I missed an agenda, an official? Last year there was a poster right there.
Yeah.
And you accomplished them all.
Yes, we did.
And so I didn't know I don't think either the House Republican or Senate Republican caucus has put out an agenda yet. Is there a reason for that? And then specifically on education, do you have any main top line goals?
Well, one of the reasons is we've got to make sure that things are fully implemented that we talked about last year. LOFT was one of the top goal, and while we passed LOFT, we still haven't hired an executive director yet and got that underway. Senate Bill 441, which dealt with the school hours and school days, we passed last year, but we've got to make sure that we get rules approved that the State Department has passed. I'm not saying the current rules are the ones. We've got to look at those and have a Senate conversation on that. But we're absolutely committed to making sure the student is the focal point of the education, and 441 went a long way in achieving that, but it's not fully implemented. Another reason for the agenda is just trying to work more closely with our House counterparts and the governor on having some shared ideas that we can roll out together. Where we've been able to do that in the past, it's been extremely successful, and we look forward to opportunities to work more closely with them this session.
On education, you said making sure the student is the focus. I think the Opportunity Scholarship Fund was one of the main things that the governor mentioned in his State of the State address. Do you have thoughts in particular on that, either as yourself or where your caucus stands?
Well, last year we had a vote on the board. It was 27 votes for it. Title was off, and I think you'll have about that same number of votes if it comes back over here. It's my understanding that bill's still eligible to be heard in the House, and we stand ready to act on it if it comes back over here. Again, it was 27 votes. Last year, title was off. I remember last year on my own internal vote count that one person was going to be a no that was a yes, and one person was going to be a yes that was a no, so we were stuck still at 27, but that's enough to get it to the governor's desk.
What was I going to say about that? I feel like there's some misconception. I mean, I think there are some people in maybe an education advocacy world who characterize it as vouchers. It's a complicated, anytime you talk about tax credits, it's complicated. So do you think that that's a factor? Do you have any frustration that it gets characterized in ways that maybe aren't fully reflective of its policy.
Yeah, all these complicated issues out here get boiled down into memes or talking points or graphs that are overly simplistic for complex issues. The bottom line is we want to make sure that every Oklahoma child, regardless of zip code or household income, has access to a quality education, and our public schools do an amazing job educating most Oklahomans. And there are some kids that are stuck in situations to no fault of their own, that we want to make sure that they have the best opportunity of succeeding they can. And I think that's what's driving Opportunity Scholarship, but there's a lot of misnomers out there. People forget that we have invested an additional $630 million over the last 2 years into public education, and our commitment to public education and continuing to advance the cause of public education is unwavered. This is a separate conversation in my mind, and one that I've supported in the past and one that I'll continue to support, where there are kids that lack opportunity. My heart pains for them. We need to make sure that they are not forgotten.